Great. Now what I see is what you see. I don't really do speaker notes or anything like that, so I don't need the second one. So if y'all have has anyone never seen me talk before? I give talks fairly often. Okay, so some of you are new. So I typically try to not give the kind of talk that's like, here's a tool, here's why it's great. I feel like I've sat through 20 years of that, and I usually want to know if I could just convince every single evangelist that's out there that's like, here's a tool, here's its weak points. Like, that would be the greatest thing in the world, right? So I'm going to propose stuff in this. I'm going to try my best to be as even-handed about everything that I talk about. And as far as the theme of this, I wanted to pretend like it was 1994. And by the way, that's my daughter, Ada. I want to prove something to her. Ada, what movie did you see on Sunday?
Jurassic Park.
And was it totally awesome? And does everyone here agree that it's totally awesome?
Yes.
See, I told you. So we're all in agreement. It's totally awesome. So this is the dream of a single code base, now with a 1994 Jurassic Park paint job. All right. So that's me. I'm Jesse. This is me around Thunder Plains. I run a shop, like Clever, but smaller. I'm in programmer for 20-something years. I still have not ascended into the place called management. You know, the meme of the Heaven's Gate, and they're like, come. I'm like, no, I'm going to be down in the mud coding. Me and John Carmack will be the last holdouts. Not to compare myself to him, but you get the idea. I do make music, art, and games, and I love Ada, my son Dorian, and Amanda, and I eat my vegetables. We all do that too, right? Yeah. See, I told you. Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right, so let's set the scene here, because I need to kind of define what I mean by one code base. It could mean like a lot of stuff, right? But I would just say that it's a thing that we keep trying to come back to in our industry. We hear the call of it, right? And it's tantalizing, and it's probably something that we shouldn't be doing all the time, but we do it anyways, just like breeding dinosaurs on an island off of Costa Rica. But the dream is we have better developer experience, there's less surface area to the code, so we can like write a whole bunch of it really fast. And look, we're hatching a little full stack developers. You heard that they didn't exist, but they do exist on my island. I don't know what I've been doing for 20 years if not full stack. Do any of you know someone that's like, full stack developers don't exist? Never seen one. Everyone who said, yeah, well, they're out there. There's like tens of us. Anyways, so decades of trial and error, bones of the past, monorepos transpilation, ORMs, DSLs. These are domain-specific languages, so like think like stylus and Sass, or even XML might count as one in some places, right? But maybe we can try again. Maybe this time we won't mess it up. But suddenly a product owner appears. He's like, hey, I need a website and a mobile app and a consistent design system, and I need to integrate it with other company systems. Roar. Oh, right, and there's going to be like real-time communication and search, and it's got to be really fast, and oh yeah, there's lots of users, so there's going to be lots of roles. And by the way, this seems like a tall order. This is normal. I get this every day in 2025. Like, the people are like, I need the kitchen sink, and I need a small team to do it. And lots of AI. This is, well, I'm sure if Matt were in the room, he'd just be like, yeah, I hear that a lot too. You try to break it down, but so what are you gonna do? Well, creation is an act of sheer will. This time it will be flawless. All right. What's funny is actually in this scene, he's looking at it and he goes, I hate that guy. But he looks so admiring in this, I had to use it. All right, but to do this, we're gonna need the beast DNA, which makes sense with Jurassic Park, and it's an acronym I just made up for this talk, so just go with it for now. So, what we both want is, my text is missing. There it is. All right, we want mobile and web. We want access control. We want to integrate with other data sources, so some kind of data federation. They ask for real-time communication. We want simple to build and deploy, at least from the point of view of the devs having to work on it, usually having to do something I built. It needs to be durable enough. It needs to be transposable from platform to platform, so it can't be like, yeah, it's all in one code base, but not really. Performant, needs to be documented. Please, no monorepos, I'm good. Like, I'm done with those. And high design consistency. There's going to be one team and one code base. That's the dream. One island, lots of dinosaurs. Okay, so this is going to be our foundation. We're going to do TypeScript, but why? Well, there's a long animation on this slide for some reason. Okay, 1 second. I'm just going to show you this. So we've got options, right? Like, we've come to TypeScript from this this is the fossil record part of the talk, guys. How did we get here? Why are we at TypeScript? Like, well, you can still write things in early JS, and you'll find Luddites, the Walden Pond of developers, are like, all I need is jQuery and a toothpick, and I can landscape, and that's good for them. But really, pretty much right away, we've been trying to transpile since the beginning, and we were doing it in CoffeeScript, and if you were a Ruby developer, you were like, I want my CSS and my JavaScript and my HTML to look exactly like Ruby, and you got your wish. That was one of the pieces. We got TSV1, which was, bro, I fixed your JavaScript for you, from the C# community, and it was awful. It completely did not understand what it was transpiling to, but that's okay. It died. We got Elm, which is cool, but it's a purely functional approach. It's cool. It's like, if you do Elm, you're cool. There's tens of you, and so I need something that other people can work on. Dart is cool, but it needs its own runtime or compile step, and outside of Flutter, it doesn't really get used, and that was probably the best contender for this stack, besides TypeScript. But then we're going to say, well, actually, TypeScript 2 to 5 is what we're looking for, the latest version, where it really understands the compile target, it has the type safety that we want, and it's still rolling out new features. It's got evangelists. Like, it's kind of in the Goldilocks zone for what we want. And everything's gone again. All right. Oh, you got to hit the button. You think I made the slides, but I didn't. Yeah, I authored the slide. I didn't use it. So what you need to know is, when you're using TypeScript, you are sitting on a fossil record of lots of things that have come and gone, and most of them have failed. And I do feel like the most recent version of TypeScript kind of understands what it's trying to do. Like, there's a few things that are cursed, like enums and things like that, but for the most part, it's good, and you should use it, and the transpilation doesn't feel too bad. It still feels like you're writing in that native language, if that makes sense. There is a joke, though, which is Arnold C. And if you don't know about that, a guy named Matt Steele up in Nebraska made it, and it's an entire language that's Turing complete out of Arnold Schwarzenegger quotes. Please look up some of these fossils. Whoa, that's too far away. Don't look. Everyone, earmuffs. I hit a button down at the bottom, and it shot ahead. Okay, this is where we are. I do want to give a shout out to possibly the most advanced transpilation language that can't be used, which is Hax. If you've never heard of it, people in the game dev community all know about Hax. They're like, it's so cool, I want to write in Hax, because they can write in Hax and like transpile to virtually anything. But yes, it's clever, but it's not necessarily the most survivable choice, because you are going to try to balance like how good of a job it does with community support and whether or not you think it's going to live in 5 years. And there's been a lot of really cool things that even I've thrown in on that I'm not convinced it's going to be around in 5 years, right? So TypeScript it is. So we're going to want to manage all this stuff. We're trying to get everything down to one code base, and we've tried to, let's just say that you've decided microservices are not what we want. Right? It's not manageable. We're not trying to scale the team. We've got one team, right? So what do? Well, there's a lot of history with monorepos and things like that. Like, if you look at old school stuff, I don't have it on here, but we would be doing plugin patterns. We'd have like one kind of like prime thing, like gulp, and then everything would be a plugin. It would basically match an interface. Okay, but then we're like, that's really hard. So you go look at other things like Babel, and they're like, well, we're going to use Lerna, where everything sits into one place, and Babel still works this way. Have you noticed that every time you update Babel, every single one of them updates at exactly the same time with the same version? There you go. That's a monorepo. But it also means that you have a project with like a gajillion folders, right? And if anyone does anything, it all moves out, okay? So there's been all these tools that have kind of gotten us to this point. And there's one that's coming up called Void Zero that looks really cool, but we're going to, what's our goal here? Well, we want less moving parts, so I think that monorepo style approach may not be good for us. We want to try as much as we can to offset the speed of us developing with transpilation, so like more build steps is not necessarily better if we can help it, and we're going to have them because this can be mobile, and no monorepos. So we're going to go with Bun and Biome for this. And this is going to be the stuff that kind of manages our ecosystem. So we can kind of dump it all into one folder. Also, monorepos don't really work well with Metro. Why these two? Well, again, the point here is there's this kind of convergent evolution on, like, mention Void Zero, I'm going to mention Bun. These tools are trying to do more to manage more surface area of what you work in with, like, one package. Like, so let me make my case here. So if you haven't seen Bun 1.2, by the way, did anyone, just so I know, did anyone try out Bun like in the past and you're like, actually, this sucks, actually, I can't use this? Okay, I did too. Have you used it since V1?
No.
All right.
I used it back when there were like hardly any Node.js.
Okay, then this talk is for you because I was that guy. I was you. And then I went back and I tried it again. Actually, let me, quick aside, what I did is I was like, let me see if the gift of running TypeScript and JavaScript all at the same time is true. Okay, yeah, that kind of works in my test repo. Let me go try to do this PDF writing utility that has like old stuff from the past. And I think it was like the Mammoth.js package was the one that like tripped it up and it was just like fell flat on its face. Didn't work. So I would say that Bun came out, it was like, oh, we are 30 times faster. Everyone was like, in a benchmark. And then they used it and it wasn't stable, and they were like, you're cool, but keep cooking. Well, they did keep cooking, and it's great with this stack. So it is very fast. Blazing speed. This is ironic, by the way. If you don't know if your library is fast and you want people to know it's fast, you can post benchmarks, or you can just say blazing speed with fire emojis, and it kind of gets the same point across. The way that they're doing node compatibility right now is they literally yoink the actual node unit test, and they run against that. That means if it's good enough for Node's units test, it's good for them, and they're at like 98-something% compatibility with some edge cases. So it is, in fact, a drop-in replacement now. Very Expo friendly, works great with this ecosystem. More and more people are adopting it. So hopefully, unlike myself, you won't be the first person to come across every problem there is. And this is a recurring theme in my life. That's right. I'm trying to recruit you all to use this stack so that way more people find bugs with me. Yay. But they've actually added a test runner, a static server, S3 support, Postgres support, a dependency checker, so I don't have to use npm check updates anymore. I can just use this thing. Several of the dependencies that were in my package JSON, I don't need anymore because I have this, which means there are less moving parts in my project, which is really great, and it's really fast, and it has really good TypeScript integration. So Bun it is. But why Biome? Again, blazing speed, right? Pyromantic speed. This is another thing, but take that for linting and formatting and stuff like that. It's like you can install ESLint and Babel and Prettier. You can stop at 5 or 6 stores, or you can stop at just one. And Biome is that one store. Now, there's some downsides to this, and I'll talk about that later, but here's what you get for it. Less dot files, less dependencies, way faster. And I'll tell you right now, when I ran Biome for the first time on my code base, I was moving over from Prettier, and there's like a little command line thing you can run, it'll just move you right over. When I ran it for the first time, it was so disorientingly fast, I thought it didn't run. So right now, you're running Prettier, and it goes and it scans everything. It's like, I'm going through all these things. You run Bun, and it's going to be like 43 milliseconds, done. I don't know how they did that, but these things are great. You will delete. I clicked something on accident. See, I'm a boomer, and I use a mouse, so like I'm bad with this thing. Yeah, it'll even lint your CSS and all that kind of stuff and format it for you. It'll sort the imports. Yeah, that's right. If you want to sort your imports and have an import sorter, it took like 3 plugins. You can just do it, right? So it's great. All right. But I'm proposing to you that you should use these things, and then you look over at some of the hottest new frameworks, and you're like, oh man, Next and Remix, I really want their router, their conventional file-based router. I don't want to have to write all that routing code, and let me tell you what, if you haven't looked at Expo 52, it can actually do that kind of stuff. And believe it or not, I like its flavor of router more than, I like the way that they do folder declaration more than next, and I like the fact that I can, by default, nest more than one folder deep more than remix, which is very weird that that is a limitation. But we'll see. It actually just merged into React Router, so I don't know. I literally just got the news last week and like, I guess we got to look at that. But its router is very competent, and I think you'll be shocked at how good its router is compared to these other frameworks that we can't shut up about. So why Expo 52? This is kind of, if you read this talk description, I was like, there's kind of a dark horse proposal for a, I'm going to actually go so far as to say that at least in terms of how it's constructed and how you use it, the router of Expo 52 stands up to a lot of the other frameworks, and that is the backbone of why you're using a lot of these other things. But it is very fast. Version 52 is using a new architecture where they got rid of the bridge for mobile, so that part's fast. By the way, when I say very fast, I want to be really clear here. I do not mean the Metro build speed. We'll get to that. I mean, when it's done building, that part runs good. File-based writer, there is something called EAS, which basically helps with a lot of the complexities of trying to get things into the App Store, which is still awful even in 2025, but it's like slightly less awful because of that. So this is great. Okay, so I've got a really great way to build. I've got a really great way to lint. I've got something that can kind of manage the rest of the project, like what I'm going to actually do in the project, and transpile and hit multiple targets. Okay, this is great. And it's easy to QA this. Like when you're early on in the life cycle of a feature, someone could like literally take a picture with their phone and it pops up on their phone, and the app pops up on their phone, the bundle. So it's good. I like it. But then you're like, all right, now I got to go fill it up with components, right? We're basically using React, right? Because we're using Expo, right? We're not using some kind of boutique thing or something like that, which is kind of the Costco of frameworks right now. Like it's going to do all the stuff you need. There's going to be a library for what you need. It may be true that, I don't know, Inferno.js can benchmark at 43 milliseconds faster in a render loop, but that's probably not the thing making your app slow. So what I care about is, can we fulfill all the business requirements quickly? And are there things out there that will help us? And if you don't know, let's see, let me check my next slide. Yeah, we're going to get back to this. Why are Tailwind and Shad CN enjoyers very, very excited and very enthusiastic about their framework? And I'm kind of missing a slide that should be here, which is the fossil record of CSS stuff. So I'm just going to tell it to you. In the beginning, there was like CSS Zen Garden, and it was like anything goes. We're just glad it's not in the HTML. Then we had Nicole Sullivan giving us object-oriented CSS, and we're like, oh, great, I love object-oriented programming because this is the past. And this is a model that makes sense to me. And then something kind of weird happens where there's like all these frameworks implementing it, and people are making, they're making grids. And they're basically saying, actually, we should be composing classes after all, which is great. So you start to see kind of proto-utility CSS around this time, okay? But it's not fully there. It's like object-oriented mainly, things are components, but you have these things you can tack on. So you start to see like semantic CSS embraces this more. You start to see, but then something happens, which is Smack. And Smack was like, nope, we're kebabbing everything, so we know exactly the order of the selectors, which I actually was not a big fan of at the time. But then more time goes on, and people are like, nope, actually composing them is good after all. Then you start to hit modern Bootstrap, which is more utility framework than the way Bootstrap looked when it first hit the scene. And then finally, some clever folks came along and said, what if we just made everything a utility class and everything was ultra hyper composable? And that is what Tailwind is. And most people look at Tailwind for the first time, if they've never used that sort of thing, and they're like, oh my God, it's so many classes. This can't possibly be good. It's long, right? And then you realize I can literally copy and paste my components from project to project, and I know for a fact they're going to look fine. Like, you suddenly realize the unit of reusability is React, not the CSS, because it's not 1995, right? So this is something that required these different streams of evolution to come along, increased use of utility classes, increased usability taking place in the JavaScript layer, not specifically in the CSS layer. All that comes together, and then you got Tailwind. So The first framework that really used this to the extreme as well is probably Shad, because it built it on top of Radix, which is a headless framework. So if you don't know, if you were writing Expo 4 years ago, this wasn't available to you. You were still writing literal objects. And so your utility for reuse was to merge objects together and basically kind of think in terms of objects, not this utility first way of doing things. Until Native Wind came along, and then that basically changed the game for working in Expo, because now those good patterns are actually available to you and very cool. And I recommend it. But like everything that needs to grow and be a big, strong dinosaur, it did not start off great. But here are kind of the three horsemen of front end in Expo right now. React Native Reanimated has been treating Native Wind as a first-class citizen, but it itself does not exclusively work that way. It really works with signals, and it's kind of more in the JS layer. But it's not like an anti-pattern to use them together, right? There's React Native Reusables, which is an earnest attempt to port Shad to Expo. And then there's Create Expo Stack, which is a scaffolding solution that will basically spit out an Expo project with a lot of this stuff ready to go. So think of it as like Create T3 app for Expo. And I love React Native Reusables so much, I contribute to it. I think it's great. And a lot of this has been merged into like other UI frameworks. I think it's called Ronin now. This one's been in kind of a punctuated equilibrium for like even like the last 9 months. First time I've used punctuated equilibrium in the most appropriate metaphor possible, so that's nice. So you can literally, I'm going to pause there. You can have shadcn in your Expo project, right? That also means that a lot of the things that you go out there and find on the web, like if you got Tailwind UI components and you guys are working with this stuff, you can also easily transport those into your Expo project with a little bit of work. I actually made a Babel transpiler for this. I do not recommend that you do the same. It's like not ready for prime time because there's going to be more issues than it's worth, but it helps me a lot. So S is for Storybook. Now this is the one. This is an old dinosaur. This is like a crocodile that's been like living in the lake, and you're like, my gosh, your design hasn't changed in so many years. You're either really awful or really cool. Well, I like Storybook, but not for the same reasons that people who make Storybook like Storybook. And I'm going to talk to you about that for a little bit. So the first thing is there is Storybook React Native. It is always a little bit behind Storybook, but I've spent some time hanging out with Danny. He's the guy who works on it. When I say hang out, I mean like virtually on Discord. He's not anywhere near us. And he has basically kind of kept up with the Vite build system and all the things that they're using in Storybook. So here are the reasons that people didn't like Storybook. They would say things like, we don't keep a design and component UI system, so why would we keep something like that? Like it's like an aspirational piece of software, right? It's like not, the juice ain't worth the squeeze, right? Like it's just like an internal thing. Or they would say, yeah, but it makes my build times really bad, right? Or now I'm maintaining 2 things instead of 1 thing. So again, I'm just gonna pause here and say there's kind of a missing slide and there's kind of a missing role for this. And it really has more to do with front-end testing than it has to do with Storybook specifically. And so I'm gonna have to do this one orally because I tried to get this into a slide and it became a big mess of icons. I was like, I will tell them. So if you've tried to do front-end testing, first of all, you should probably know that it's the most negotiable testing because it's kind of awful. In 2013, I talked with some engineers at Walmart, and they were working on something called Magellan. And at the time, we were doing stuff in something called Cucumber.js. So this is like extreme front-end testing, right? This is, so you smile. Do you remember Cucumber? Do you remember those days when you make the scenario outlines?
It's still here. Cucumber's still around.
It's still around? Okay, well.
We're still trying to test runs
I'm sorry.
properly.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you about this. So there's a lot of things that it did that were interesting. You had insanely provable things. You could take product docs and basically run these scenarios. Okay, Cucumber.js, we worked on the scenario outlines. You know that big table that you have to fill out? Like Ben, Ventris, and I. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The product devs made us do it. Anyway, so it's amazing, but you're going to have another team maintaining the Cuc files, right? It's going to take a lot of manpower to keep those things together. As far as the Magellan thing I mentioned, They fail a lot because you basically run all these scenario outlines in like a virtual browser. So what did they do? They're like, oh yeah, our solution was just to run them 10,000 times. And then we would look at the sliver ones that failed, and if we did enough tests, we'd actually start to get significant differences. Okay, cool. Small team, guys. Remember, small team, but you do still want to have durability on the front end. And your designers are like, how do I know if an animation fired in the correct amount of time? That's something that I feel, man. Like, all right, I actually am with you on that one. Like, I agree. Like, you can tell by looking. Like, fighter pilots and my aunts in another state don't have the same sensibilities to how fast an animation should go. You just got to kind of like sense it, right? So the utility of this is if you design all of your components in Storybook first with mock data, you basically make a visual unit test. So you can test categories of things that are not easy to test otherwise. Like if you were to do snapshot tests, they would be too brittle. Or if you were to do cube tests, you just can't test for it. You can't test for is the padding wrong on this side. You have to go look. Or if we put someone's name in there who is very, very long, does it just like look unbalanced? Or if there's not 3 points in the list item, there's 50, yeah, it renders correctly, but it looks dumb because now there's this big blank thing on the side, right? So what you can do is every single time you come across a category of something that is undesirable visually or it doesn't work right, you make an additional story and it works like a unit test, and then more people can go check them. And as you go, you can also write all your documentation in here too. And you can do a bunch of ally checks in here too. You see where I'm going with this? And when you need people to know if things are actually working on your browser or on your mobile device, you can load the exact same components in a clean room environment on both of them and check them first. You know what this does for a small team? This atomicizes the work. I can be like, you go make the components. When he's done, you're going to integrate them, but you're integrating the last person. So instead of having bigger chunks, breaks them apart. I think it's great, and I think people who clown on it in 2025 don't understand what makes it good. I like it so much that I'm actually trying to mock permissions and access control inside of it, because sometimes things don't look the same if you have a different role, like you'll see like less buttons. Well, if I have permissions where I can see 50 buttons and you have permissions where you can see 3, yes, they may render correctly and they may pass the Qt file, but they may look stupid, right? Or the text might get too tiny or something because you're doing something clever because it's 100%. I think it's good, and I think that people are going to come around to why this is good. And it doesn't cost you that much velocity. It doesn't feel like a second site. It feels like unit tests for your one site in one category of the stack. And remember, we got Bun for the other stuff. Like if you're writing resolvers, writing things on the server, you can run your assertion tests with Bun, right? So we're doing great. We have way less moving parts on the front end. We can use the latest and greatest with Shad. We can target mobile and the web. This is really exciting. What are we going to do about our data? Last time I clicked it and it worked, but this time it's not working. So I'm just going to show you this. So it's a small team, right? So we're not going to be necessarily, we don't have an armada of people writing SQL views, right? We've worked at places like that before where that was kind of a way to do it. It was very fast, but you had to like maintain additional people that were probably different from the middleware. So the theme of this part is, you're like, I want more and less covers. It's like, I want more and less SQL. Feels like the consistent theme down the ages. So it's like, we come up with something like Hibernate, and like, oh my gosh, we don't need an army of DBAs, we just need a few. The middleware people can suddenly get things in the database, and it's type safe, but it only works in my language. And then there's Active Record, which I'm sure Ruby folks remember, which is like kind of similar, but if you're not using MVC, it kind of like the abstraction breaks down, and it's still really good. But again, I don't think it's what we're looking for, and we're not writing in Ruby, so that's not going to work for us. Then there's, for those of you who've read the description, there's .NET Entity Framework, which is basically in Hibernate, but worse in every way. But think 2008 terms. It got better, I heard, but who cares? We're not writing in C#, but we're learning from these things, because once you start hitting subsonic and you start hitting Dapper, now you start seeing micro ORMs where developers are like, okay, so I was writing all this stuff in C#, and I had an N+1 query, and the only way to figure it out was to run this other program called NH Profiler that Allende wrote. and go look for them that way and go hunt them down with additional tooling. So I actually had more moving parts. It's like I got all these velocity gains, but then I would hit these points where I needed to figure out why something was performing in a way that I didn't expect. So I had to like have more tooling and more stuff. And sometimes you just want an escape hatch. And so people are like, well, what if we had micro ORMs? Or what if we had a scaffolding approach? What if we did it in this kind of different way that there's more escape hatches, but it still can give you a little bit of velocity gain? Okay, that's exciting. Great. Then GraphQL happens. And we forgot everything that we learned for about 3 years. So around 2015, and by the way, if any of you guys use Scaffold.io or GraphQL, I'm so sorry, I went through it as well. It was a cool idea. If you don't know, Prisma is GraphQL after they realized GraphQL sucked and they trashed it and they started over and made Prisma. And then they actually trashed it again and made Prisma 2, and it's completely different than Prisma 1, but they didn't change the name. So I technically should have another point on here, but I ran out of sideways. Anyways, the one on here that is the most interesting so far is Prisma. And here is why. Prisma does have a concept of GraphQL integration. Well, not in and of itself, but people do it, right? It does have a concept of, well, there's a DSL, so you write in this other language called Prisma Query Language, and it spits out a client that you can use, right? So that's cool. But I'm going to go a step further and tell you that, look, I need more and less SQL. Aren't you listening? Don't you understand? I need more and less dinosaurs, and I need more and less SQL at the same time. Is it too much to ask? Okay, D is for drizzle. So that's what you get. Why is drizzle cool, and why do I see it as an evolution of this fossil record that I told you? It's because it understands that you need a client and an abstraction for doing day-to-day things. It also understands you need heavy escape hatches. And I actually left off something too. If you were working in that stuff like in Hibernate, how did you do your migrations? Did anyone work in that? We weren't even using C#, we were using like Rake. Like we had like this totally other thing, and every time we wanted to migrate, we had to write a bunch of code around the migration. Well, they actually generate the migrations in SQL, right? But here's the thing. They're not always right. But that's okay, because you could just like write a little more SQL in there. You could even generate an empty migration and write your own SQL if you just want to like move some tables around and stuff like that. So you're still writing SQL, but you're not doing it raw, right? And I also want to tell you that there's also kind of a developer sensibility about SQL that I saw over the years. I'll save that for a second. No, I'll leave it up. This is hilarious. I asked AI to make a drizzle source. I thought maybe this would be a fun way to do the talk. And like, I don't know if you can see, it's like drizzle cirrus, TypeScript first. Anyway, not you. Should you be writing SQL? Should developers be writing SQL directly? Not DBAs, but should the devs, the middleware people, be writing SQL directly? I'll tell you, when I started developing, it was almost taboo to do it. People had seen things. They're like, yes, we wrote the SQL directly, and we left one character off, and we dropped the tables. And like, there was a lot of other things going on with their environment, but it was like, no, like, writing SQL raw is dangerous, and you shouldn't do it. You need this additional type safety from languages, and a lot of that came from riding the wave of the benefits of type safety and type safe languages, and also the testing sensibilities. I went to a DBA meetup, this was years ago, 15 plus years ago, and unit testing was what everyone was talking about, and the DBAs were like, we're unit testing, check it out. All right, here's my database, run the SQL, yep, looks pretty good. And we were like, yeah, that is not mechanical verification of your code. Right, so there was this kind of schism where you start seeing all these ORMs, because a lot of middleware people were like, no, SQL, don't write it directly, and if you are, you're like going full Walden on me, and you're landscaping with a toothpick, and you shouldn't do it. Also, we have to keep a lot of people that write it. But then you fast forward, and people are like, SQL is good, actually. Actually, no one's ever been fired for picking Postgres. So I think that Drizzle right now is at the sweet spot of it will help you where you need it. There's escape hatches where you need it. There was maybe about 10 years of possible incompetence from the middleware programmers that never touched the SQL, and maybe they should have. But you also get the benefits, the things that they brought to the table. So I'm really excited about Drizzle. I will tell you, it is a newer library, and I have opened many issues in Drizzle. Like its timestamp was wrong at one point, but it's still good, and you should use it. You should throw in on it, because I think in 5 years, it's still going to be used. Okay, now, S is for SST. This is the second S in SST because we're talking about Postgres at this point, right? We need a place to go put it. We can go stick it on Heroku. But we remember our product owner? They were like, I need AI. I need WebRTC. So I'm like, I don't know what I'm picking up at Costco. I should actually put this in presentation mode until everything disappears, right? So what is SST? SST, I don't know what it stands for, actually. But it is an abstraction on top of Pulumi, and Pulumi is an abstraction for managing AWS. This was another one where I probably should have included a slide where I was like, first there was Ansible, and then there was Chef, and then there was Terraform. And it's always been terrible. And then we had the Lambda framework, and it was kind of hard because it made an environment over here, and you were actually running it over there, and they could be different. And then there's Arc Codes, and they just made a mock for every single thing. Well, SST, the way that it does it, is actually really cool. Every developer has their own copy of everything. You, as a developer, are running, I'm the Simian. I run in the environment called the Simian. I have my copy of Postgres, I have my copy of Lambdas. If I hose everything, if I rebuild everything, it's fine. Amanda has a copy called Amanda. She has the Amanda copy, right? And then there's the development copy, the production copy, the QA copy, that we're going to demo so it's safe data, but it looks like and acts like production copy, whatever you want to do. You can manage as many stages as you want. And the worst part about this is many copies of Postgres can be expensive. That's the boo part. But the yay part is if you are doing migrations, if you're doing anything like that, you can kind of do it with confidence. You can hook it up with your CI pipeline. And if someone comes along and they're like, actually, I need AI, lots of it, you can be like, oh, we'll just go put something in Bedrock, which is the glowing one down here. Like, or I need to do image detection. Okay, great. Well, you can use recognition. Like, there are services there that are available to you if the product changes, and as a small team, you typically want that. The other thing is, and this is interesting, you'll probably pay less for them because a lot of people resell these, but they're hard to use, but they're not hard for you because you're using SST now, right? Like how many upload a thing services are there that is essentially reselling S3? You're good. You just use S3. Upload a thing. I'm not referring to any specific company for sure. All right. Anyway, so I already told you we're going to be using GraphQL. Oh, by the way, that was AppSync for us. I'm going to talk about this. A lot of people are saying GraphQL is hard in 2025. I'll get to that. I don't think that's true. But we need the next A in the beast DNA to fit our Jurassic Park theme is Apollo. All right. We need something that is as type safe and as self-documenting as possible. If we need to federate other data sources, we can do it, and GraphQL is actually really good at that. And a lot of people will say, oh, GraphQL is great when you have different teams in different languages. Like I have these people on the server and these people on the client. Full stop. It is great for small teams. It is really, really good because you have a Rosetta Stone, you guys can work fast, and you know that if it's not in that GraphQL definition file, it ain't real. Like that's everything that goes across the wire, which is nice. So, why Apollo then? Apollo is our state management tool. We're working in mobile, right? Can we use RSCs inside of a phone? No, you can't. Yet. It doesn't make sense in a phone, right? Yet. You don't send HTML to a phone. The phone has a bundle and it calls native code beneath it. For the most part, if you're working in mobile, you're still working with a data first pattern, which means you need to optimize for your data first pattern. You don't want to overfetch, right? You want to cache as much as you can. You want to have a clear way of typing every time that you make a query that's a little bit different. Oh, I added first name this time. I need my type to update. That's what this is good at. That is what Apollo is optimized for. It's not optimized for it's optimized for like a data first way. And that does mean that your website will have to compromise on this a little bit, but it also means that you're going to get a lot of like really good work in your phone, right? So it's a good choice for us in this case because it's the right amount of compromise. Okay, so but I want to address the elephant in the room, which is GraphQL still good in 2025? Because a lot of you are not a lot of you, but a lot of folks right now, if you're keeping up with the cool kids, they're like, man, GraphQL was amazing, and now we just only use gRPC. I actually think it's still good. GraphQL, 5 minutes, seriously, that's it? Oh my gosh, I gotta go fast. GraphQL CodeGen will generate all your type, that's amazing, and you can enforce it across the stack. It is actually easy to set up. You guys can do it in like an hour, I promise, with like AppSync. Just follow the instructions. They want you to do it right because they want to sell you the AppSync. You can do data federation. You get type safety. You can generate a new type every time you make a new query. And you can compose them so each component only knows exactly the data it needs from the database. Like there's some really good patterns here that I don't have enough time to put in the talk. I could give a whole talk on how to use GraphQL correctly now, and it looks extremely different from how people used it in the past. So there are good patterns here, and there's good stuff here. That's what I think. Okay. And finally, the A is access control, which makes sense. So I'm just going to tell you right now, this I actually think is one of the more kind of unsolved problems. People have figured it out, and you see companies like Clerk come along, but I generally believe that true access control, like your capabilities, is not as solved of a problem, and it's probably something we should be spending more attention on, like as an industry. But Castle is a very good library to abstract it in a way that you can work across the stack. You can enforce things on the server and on the client, and you can use this kind of language. Like if you can read posts, then you do or don't see this component, right? So this is, if you do this on the server, you're good. And actually, just to throw this out there with GraphQL, you can actually enforce things like complexity rate limiting and all that kind of stuff. So it's fine. So it's great. So since I only have 5 minutes, I'm just going to skip these 2 slides. I was going to tell you the workflow example. Like first you go make it in Storybook, then you check it, and people can QA the Storybook instance. Then you can go integrate it into the app, and then people can QA that. So kind of like how they would get it through AS. But you just have to trust me that when you make a new front-end component, it feels very similar to working in the web, but you can also use your phones with the AS and get things on your phone really quickly, and it's nice. Same thing with the back end. I'm short on time. For RTC thing, I was going to describe how you could shim WebRTC for both the binary and also for the web, and you could basically work with a very similar looking interface, and you could have RTC across your stack, but it feels like one piece of code orchestrating everything. And you would use these subscriptions and AppSync for the real-time communication part on the server. Okay, this is the part I really want to get to. It's perfect with no downsides whatsoever, right? This is why you came to the talk. Yes, your app will run fast, but your build will run slow. Metro is still slow. That is the absolute truth of it. And it is doing more work than a typical bundler, so I don't know if that's really its fault. But when you're like using Vite and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it hot reloaded so fast, it is not like that. But you're also covering more surface area with every reload, so, you know. All right. Yes, you get to use React. Yes, get to use React. I mean that completely unironically. It is the vanguard of UI advancements. Shad came out in that, right? It's got lots of options. It's still kind of the king. Like if you want to go get a job, you should learn React, right? Like it's good. But we're going to get RSCs at some point. That's a harder architectural challenge. If you want to go hook up million.js inside of your editor and like count every function, guess what? The architecture is different in React Native. Like it doesn't work exactly the same, right? Like you're going to be a little bit behind React, but you're not going to be really far behind where like another language has to implement the idea their own way or something like that, right? So yes, but yes, you get to use CSS, but you don't get all of the CSS. Yes, you're using Tailwind, it's real, but it's an abstraction on top of what was inside of React Native. There's some differences. You don't get CSS Grid. It does not exist in React Native at all, and that makes me so sad. They're like pseudo-states may not make sense inside of a mobile app. Like what, you know, it'll get mad at you for trying to set a cursor because you want it to look a certain way on the web, but it doesn't exist in mobile, but you're like, no, really, TypeScript, I know what I'm doing, right? So yeah, you kind of have CSS at home. You get to use the patterns, but you don't get to use 100% of all the cool stuff that comes out. Bummer. Yes, you can use React Compiler now. I mean, you knew, Adam, this was going to be in this, right? But it's moderately cursed. It's not React Compiler's fault. I am obligated to say this. So short story is I turned on React Compiler inside of my Metro project, and I was like, how are people not noticing this? Like, it works, except when I move this thing over here, now the hook is undefined. So I like griped on the internet about this, which was a really great idea. Because someone, and I'm not going to point out who, but someone very popular on the internet just retweeted it with eyeballs, and it eventually got escalated to the person who writes React Compiler, who is also internet famous. And so I'm just like, oh man, I felt like Larry David or something like that, right? But she was really nice, and she was like, I really do want to see it because what you're describing sounds crazy. So we hopped in a call. First of all, it was real. The bug was real. We both saw it with our own eyes. Like, the UFO landed, they came out. Just our cameras broke, okay? But everyone saw it. But it turns out that it is actually just how it integrates with the Metro compiler, which kind of fits into point number earlier, right? It's a little bit behind, right? But I did figure out how to get past my issue. So, despite the trade-offs is my proposed stack, the beast's DNA, I have to say it just like that every time, even in meetings at work. Is it still worth it? Well, it depends. You will accept a more challenging web DX for an improved mobile DX. You'll have a more consistent but limited component model, right? You're going to get the utility. Oh, I forgot to mention, you're going to get SQL and Postgres, but RDS is not real Postgres. It's like bizarro world Postgres. So like you will get some weird bugs down in the machine, but you get it for a fair price and it will match with everything else, right? In general, this is what I would say if I needed to sum all this up. Your team will go faster. Thanks for coming, dude. See you around. Your team's going to go faster, but the individual members do need more experience because they are going to be working across the whole stack. It's like harder to compartmentalize knowledge because it is one big thing, right? And a lot of these things are about not abstracting it. It's not like, you can write SQL, just write more C#. No, like you actually do need to know SQL now, right? But you still get the benefits, right? So it is a great stack, but it is also hard to recommend to everyone depending on what your experience level is. But if you start picking it up, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to actually learn full stack developer. You will be that dinosaur jumping out of the egg that product managers at large companies insist don't exist. You, in fact, will release full stack applications. Anyway, that's my talk. Full stack and cross stack. That's the important part. All right. I would love questions because I would love to tell you war stories, but I don't know how much time we have. So.
Okay, next question.
Oh, please.
And if anyone needs to ditch, you can do that.
Absolutely. Yes.
I have a question about when it comes to web. So we tried a similar approach with Kotlin and Flutter, where it spits out the web, but it has to ship. Flutter ships its whole runtime with your app, which made it load.
Don't got to do that. Let me talk about that because actually I left off the downside.
Jesse, can you repeat the question?
Yes, the question he said is when he used Flutter and Dart and Kotlin, they have to ship the Flutter runtime basically as well, which kind of feels like the old school Java applet in a sense, or like a Flash. So you do not have to do that here. It's straight up, it turns it into HTML. Like it is the web. But I left off a downside, and I can't believe I didn't do this. Remember I told you don't get to use all of the CSS? The thing that it spits out in the web is like div, 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 div. So you're going to have to think about that when it comes to accessibility, right? And if you think about it, it makes sense. It's taking a React Native view and it turns it into a div. And it takes a React Native this and it turns it into that. I've experimented making a Babel transpiler where I could give it an as tag and it would basically spit out the correct semantic thing. So it will work on the web. And if you're making a control panel where people need to log in inside of an office and they just need to see a bunch of stuff on the website and then they're going to control what appears on the mobile site, which honestly, that's one of the most common situations here, right? Is we're actually making a mobile app, but it requires all these dials and knobs that people log into and do big internet work on. By the way, is that a millennial thing? When I say big internet and little internet, and you guys know what I'm talking about? All right, if I need to work a spreadsheet, I go to the big internet. If I want to do a feed, I can go to the little internet, right? Little internet lives on here. The children only know about the little internet, but I remember the old ways. Anyway, so yeah, you got big internet workers and little internet workers, right? So no, it'll totally do that. It's real HTML. It's the real thing. So it's better in that respect, I would say, right? But it is not like artisanal hand-woven HTML, right? There is one layer of abstraction there. And when you're using Native Wind, it does a CSS reset that seems a little bit insane. What I mean by that is it's going to make the CSS in your browser behave more like the CSS in mobile, and they do not behave the same. So it's going to set a min height to 0, and it's going to do all these stuff that's not a typical reset. So what that means is if you find a really great laid out page, and you're like, yeah, man, I'm just going to switch all the views to divs, and you're going to paste it, and it's going to mostly work. But then your image doesn't appear because it's got smooshed and things like that, right? So it does not require the runtime. It has those advantages. It is real, honest to goodness HTML. It's just not the thing that you expected completely, but once you work with it a little bit, you can kind of get a feel for the abstraction, and it's fine. And it is still better than stuff from the past that used to spit out HTML, if that makes sense. Like there's been some really things that spit out tables and stuff like that. All right, that was a great question, by the way. Thank you. Anyone else?
So it's probably called, David, you got some questions, just see if you'll stick around for.
Oh, yeah. It's my favorite thing to talk about. It's fine.
One last
In
round.
science.